Fab, thank you. Thank you everyone, and thank you to Phil and all the team behind today's event. It's really exciting to be here. It's been great to hear the talks we've already had, and I know there's some more exciting ones to come. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this event today. My name is Zoe Allman and I am an Associate Dean Academic from De Montfort University, particularly based in the Faculty of Computing, Engineering and Media. I'm also a Principal Fellow for the Higher Education Academy and a National Teaching Fellow as well. And in terms of my day job, very much I'm based in the Faculty of Computing, Engineering and Media with oversight of everything academic. But actually a lot of the work I do is around mental well-being and embedding mental well-being in particular. And I do that within my own university context, but also as part of an Advanced HE national project. And also this year I'm leading the Quality Assurance Agency Embedding Mental Wellbeing Collaborative Enhancement Project as well. So I'll explain a little bit more about those things as we go through. And hopefully that'll provide a bit of insight related to today's important topics around teaching online. Now, it's so important that we think about embedding mental wellbeing and mental wellbeing now. And I think this is such an important topic now. It's an important topic across the sector because so much has happened in the last 18 months, particularly. And so much of our practice, no matter what role we're in within HE, has adapted. And it's taken on a much greater use of the online forum in whatever sense that might be for us in our individual roles than we had before. Prior to the pandemic, would we have seen a talk about mental wellbeing sitting comfortably alongside talks around assessment, publishing, feedback and online classroom management? And I'm not sure that we would. So in a way, it's great that mental wellbeing has been elevated to this level because it is really key that we think about it alongside everything else that's happening. In my own institution, De Montfort, based in Leicester, back in sort of the spring of 2020, just prior to the pandemic hitting us really, we were in early discussions about what embedding mental wellbeing in the curriculum looked like for our students. And our focus was very much on what we were doing for and with our students. And so we were doing some consultative activities, working with our staff as well as our students, and it became increasingly clear that actually the focus shouldn't just be about our students, it actually needed to be about our staff as well, thinking about what their mental wellbeing was and ensuring good mental wellbeing for all of us. Along came the pandemic, causing a major change to almost everything we knew and thought to be true in what we were doing in our activity. It changed lots of our long established working processes and it remains part of something that we're doing now as we try to transition back to more of that on-campus activity. But in a way, the pandemic has acted as a really useful catalyst for discussions around mental well-being. Because it's been such a focus nationally, it's helped it become a focus as part of those academic discussions, and that's why it's great to be part of this today. And as I mentioned, what's been really key is to think and to change our thinking from just thinking about embedding mental wellbeing for students, but also to think about it for staff as well, because the people that we're asking to do some activity around making sure that embedding mental wellbeing activity is included in the curriculum, those people who are doing that activity need to feel in a good place of mental wellbeing themselves. So it's really important that we consider that. And actually, through looking at some of the examples of what constitutes good mental wellbeing in the curriculum, so things that we might do and we might put in place for our students in terms of structuring our lessons, how we might approach things, signposting, this kind of thing, actually a lot of that translates to really good practice for staff as well. And it's not just about making sure that embedding mental wellbeing happens within our classroom, but in all sorts of activities that we engage with, in all sorts of ways that we engage with others. So where this journey all started for my own university, De Montfort, was alongside 12 other institutions as part of an advanced HE national project on embedding mental wellbeing in the curriculum back in the summer of 2019. And it was a project that would bring lots of institutions together to review what's happening in the sector, to develop some really exciting conversations and plans to further enhance embedding mental wellbeing within our own curriculum, within our own contexts. And as part of that, De Montfort had its own plans, but then, like others, With the pandemic hitting, we needed to quickly rethink what we were doing. We didn't want to lose the emphasis on the work that had already started, but actually we recognised that there was going to be, and there is, we're now seeing it, this focus on mental well-being across the national media, for example, and we wanted to harness that and make sure we were ready and we were prepared and best supporting our colleagues and our students. So we looked at activity around, well, what can we do to enhance the materials that we provide for our staff and our students around mental well-being and mental health, for example. We looked at developing resources so that staff could feel empowered when they walked into the classroom to offer some of this message directly, rather than relying on professional services colleagues who typically had done that previously. We offered enhanced training around staff welfare activity, and also learning and organisational development around things like universal design for learning and emotionally intelligent teaching as well. And a key thing was we celebrated what was already happening. We recognised that we weren't starting from a blank piece of paper, we were starting from a really strong point. So we celebrated the people who were already doing some of this work. So when I invite you to think about this in your own context. Each of us will have a different starting point. Reflect on what's happening in mental well-being, in your role, in your remit, in your area. Recognise what's happening, celebrate it, and consider what you can do. Focus on the positive. Don't jump straight to what we can't do. Focus on the positives. What can we do to support mental well-being going forward? Now, following the 2019 publication of the University Mental Health Charter, there has been increasing activity within the sector, particularly, as I say, in light of the pandemic as well. And the Universities UK step change for mentally healthy universities from 2020 calls for universities to be places that promote mental health and well-being, enabling all students and all staff to thrive and succeed to their best potential. So really important recognition that it's students and staff. We've got to get mental well-being right for our whole university population in order for it to have greatest impact and benefit. And many of us in our own institutions will have seen lots of activity happening around mental well-being or mental health offers, particularly during the pandemic. I recall in my own situations, lots of offers of things like mindfulness sessions, colouring sessions, yoga activities that you could try at home. But when we think about embedding mental well-being for students, often what we're thinking about is activity in our curriculum that recognises trigger points, where an academic may think, actually, there's something in what I'm going to do today, something in my lesson, or there's something a few weeks down the line that could cause some anxiety, perhaps, or could cause some stress, or whatever it might be. And I want to be sure that as an academic or a person delivering that session, that actually my students are best prepared for it. We want to effectively reduce the impact of those triggers by preparing the individuals for what's to come, acknowledging that sometimes we do have triggers that cause a little bit of anxiety or potentially mental or physical response. But by acknowledging what's coming and anticipating it and recognising it, when it occurs, we're more ready for it, and we might already know where to go for our next piece of support, or simply by just recognising it, sometimes that actually helps us to address it more effectively. And this is something I think as a sector we could do better for staff. We're getting good at doing this for students, but we don't always do it ideally for our staff. Now, many of us have worked at home for an increased period of time, and our interpretation of the ideal learning environment has changed over time. And we've adapted, and we are continuing to adapt. We've adapted to changes in our learning environment, or our seminar, our webinar environments. We've adapted to changes in visual and physical cues, and we've become more resilient as well to changing priorities and changing contexts. We've got better as well at working and supporting others who are experiencing things in other ways and perhaps reacting or acting to things differently and to the uncertainties that come our way so regularly now. And the global pandemic for many of us has actually provided a period of intense learning and relearning. But for many of us, it doesn't look like this that's on the screen anymore. It doesn't tend to look like this sort of very much somebody's at the front and we all sit and listen and take it in. Or at least it's given us a chance to think about whether our learning environments need to continue to look like this. Now, working in higher education, many of us would say we enjoy the opportunity to learn, but we've actually been learning throughout this pandemic and relearning at a greater pace than ever before. Often, I think, without stopping to really reflect on that. So after today, I encourage you, take a few minutes, reflect and celebrate on your achievements. Think about what you can do now, how you've adapted, how you've become more resilient to your activities and your online approaches. In late January, GIST called for universities to embed wellbeing in the curriculum to save student mental health, but actually it was clear this related to staff as well. In May, Student Minds also launched their University Mental Health Charter as well, calling for a whole university approach, and many of you may be exploring this. Again, for those of you who are, what I would say is reflect on how you have adapted and how you have become more resilient in the face of this pandemic and in the face of greater online activity. Recognise your achievements in support of your mental well-being and recognise the achievements of those around you. We all know how far a little message of thanks or praise can go to making us feel so much better and to inspiring our next activity.
We've got about a minute left.
Thank you. So what's next for the sector? There's an awful lot happening. Many of you may be involved in working towards Charter Award statuses, and that activity could be happening within your provider. In terms of what's happening in the sector, one of the pieces of work that I'm leading on with the Quality Assurance Agency and 7 other providers and a students' union is actually in support of this whole university approach to mental wellbeing. We're actually aiming to provide some sector definitions and examples of what good embedded mental wellbeing activity looks like, and we're doing that through creating open educational resources so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can take some examples that already work and try them in your own context, and that's launching on Blue Monday, which is the 17th of January 2022. We've chosen that day because it's usually considered the most depressing day of the year. So it's deliberately chosen to reframe and refocus on the positive aspects of mental health and mental wellbeing by providing the sector with these resources. So my parting words to you are think and reflect. And I know that's a really hard thing. We often bounce from one thing to the next, but reflect on the positives, reflect on your achievements. When we think about mental wellbeing, we often think, oh gosh, we'll leave that for the team who've got that in their title. But actually, there's lots of little bits we can do. And some of those we've actually come across as just good practice things in the other talks that we've already heard about today. So consider your approach to embedding mental wellbeing, whatever level you're operating at, and consider your sphere of influence, because there's always bits we can do. So reflect, celebrate, recognise what you're doing, and hopefully we can all ensure that we've got good mental wellbeing for all. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, such an important talk and something that I think, we can never kind of, oh, you're sharing your screen there.
Sorry.
That's okay. Something I think we should all definitely be taking away from today, and we're just trying to just make sure we're just focusing on the positives kind of on a daily basis if possible. I know sometimes I have to do something as silly as writing a post-it note that I stick next to my monitor that just, stay positive. It sounds silly, but it does actually make quite a big difference, certainly to me anyway. We do have maybe time for one question. So if anyone has a question for Zoe, Anne has raised her hand. Nick, would you be able to give Anne presenter permission?
Yep, you should be able to unmute yourself now, Anne.
Oh, thanks, Zoe. Really, really important. I think probably most of the participants will agree with us. It's such a important, sometimes could be overlooked, and especially I'm always interested in talking about not only just for the students. I always ask questions, what about this mental support, well-being support for staff, which is equally important. Now, you mentioned about like EQ training in your presentation. I'm just interested to know a little bit more about how you do that, what that involves. And sometimes we can have the perception that EQ could be more kind of like, just like a little bit like IQ is pre-birth, so you can't really have much control, although you can train it. So how would you kind of utilize that to kind of promote the well-being of both students and staff, please?
Thank you, Anne. And can I just get clarity on EQ? Sorry, just to check
that.
Emotional,
kind of emotional, yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, we use a slightly different acronyms. That's fine. Yes. So one of the things that we've looked at, and one of the things that we do, particularly at De Montfort University, is we look at universal design for learning. This concept that actually learning should be open and accessible for all. And as part of that, we've been looking at actually expanding some of the sort of communities of practice, an idea that Rachel mentioned earlier, around what we do with Universal Design for Learning into some of the areas of the broader piece around Universal Design for Learning that we hadn't looked at before, around sort of communities of well-being and belonging and that kind of thing. One of the things that we've also been looking at is some of the work around emotionally intelligent teaching and learning. And again, these aren't necessarily things that are radically sort of new or transformative, but actually just, as many people have said before, actually thinking about how the person who receives the message is hearing the message. And I know that was something that Phil was talking about earlier around sort of feedback and things, and that's really key. So some of the work we've been doing is actually just starting to talk in that kind of language, to sort of say, you know, think about how that's received by the person receiving, or how that's going to be engaged with in the middle of a busy day and all this kind of thing. And actually sort of doing some activities with our colleagues and providing some new opportunities for them to practice doing things, a bit like the example Phil gave earlier. You know, you may say something with the best of intentions or write something with the best of intentions, but it can be perceived differently. So we've offered kind of different activities within some of our already created training sessions to give people the chance to experience what that's like. Much like, you know, we may give feedback to students and then we may get feedback from a reviewer. It's that kind of actually sort of thinking about how that's received is really key. So we try and flip that round to give people a chance to be on both sides of that and consider how that practice feels when you're on both sides of it. So I hope that's useful.